My father once laughed when I said I wanted to be an artist. He told me I'd end up broke, that real jobs didn't come with paint on your hands. 8 years later, he called and asked for my autograph so he could sell one of my paintings. He didn't know it was already hanging in a museum. Would you believe your own mother could steal from you and blame you for it? If it happened to you, would you let it go, or would you make her face what she did? My name is Lena. I grew up in a suburb outside Cleveland. The houses all looked the same. Lawns trimmed, driveways clean, neighbors who nodded but never stopped to talk. My dad, Daniel, was an accountant. He liked things lined up, columns, routines, dinner at 6. My mother worked nights as a nurse when I was younger, so it was mostly him and me at the table. He kept a calculator beside his plate, even when he wasn't working, just thumbing the buttons like it was a nervous tick. I was the quiet one. No brothers or sisters to hide behind. I drew on everything, scraps of paper, the margins of my homework, sometimes the back of receipts if I could grab them before he shredded them. My dad used to shake his head and say, "That's not a real hobby, Lena. You can't live on dreams." When I got older and started painting, he'd leave the garage door open so the smell wouldn't drift inside. He said oil paint was a waste of money. Most nights, I'd wait until the house was quiet before I started working on my canvases. I kept them stacked in my closet or under the bed. Sometimes, I'd come home and find one missing. My dad would shrug and say the cleaning lady must have tossed it. We didn't have a cleaning lady. I never called him out on it, just picked up another canvas and started over. Every family dinner, he'd make the same joke about my art. "Art won't pay the bills, Lena." Then he'd laugh and my mom would try to smile, but she looked tired. I thought maybe he was worried, or trying to push me toward something safer. I told myself he'd get used to it. I even believed it for a while. But looking back, it was more than that. There was something in his voice that didn't want me to keep going. I see it now, how he chipped away at the edges, hoping I'd stop trying. The gallery was full, which surprised me. I hadn't expected that many people, even with the emails and the posts and the reminders sent out in the weeks before. There was music playing, low and tinny, and the smell of wine and new canvas. I stood near the entrance, nodding at people I half recognized from art school or from social media. My friends clustered around one of the smaller pieces, whispering to each other. My mother hovered by the drinks table, refilling her own glass, glancing at the door every few minutes. He was late, almost an hour. When he finally walked in, he didn't look at me. He stopped in the middle of the doorway, holding his coat, and scanned the room like he was checking the turnout for a PTA meeting. His mouth pulled sideways when he caught my eye, and he gave a short, tight nod. I heard my mother call his name, but he ignored her and walked in a slow line toward the center of the gallery, past the crowd, past the table of business cards. My curator, Julia, approached him first. She offered her hand. He barely looked at her, just nodded, and then turned to the room, raising his voice a little. He said, "Looks like quite the crowd. Did you hire extras for this?" Some people laughed, awkward and short, not sure if it was a joke. She looked at me, her mouth tight. I kept my face still. I tried to find something to do with my hands, but they just hung at my sides. I watched my father move around the room, stopping in front of each piece for maybe half a second, never close enough to see the brushwork. He leaned toward one of my high school friends and said, "I hope she gave you a decent appearance fee." I heard someone cough behind me. My mother crossed the room, trying to reach him, but he'd already moved to the big canvas, the one I'd spent nights finishing, the one that was supposed to anchor the whole show. He stood in front of it, arms folded, and shook his head, making sure everyone saw. He said that's supposed to be art, and actually laughed not loud but sharp. It echoed. I saw Julia's face go blank. My friend Sam stepped away from the group. Another couple looked down at the floor, suddenly interested in their drinks. I stood there, half smiling, pretending not to notice. My hands were shaking. I tried to look busy, but all I could do was stare at the floor, then up at my father, then at the faces turning away. He didn't stop. He kept moving around the room, pointing at things, making little comments under his breath to anyone who would listen. A few people tried to laugh with him, but most just drifted toward the exits or over to the food table. Julia came over and touched my shoulder. She said, "Ignore him. This is your night." Her voice was soft, but I could see she was embarrassed for me. I nodded, but I couldn't move. It felt like the lights had gotten brighter, sharper, and my skin itched under my jacket. My mother finally got to him, took his arm, and tried to pull him aside. He shrugged her off and kept scanning the crowd, checking his watch. He looked bored, like he was waiting for the movie to start. More guests started to leave early. I heard footsteps and the sound of the door. My friend Lily squeezed my hand, whispered, "It's fine. He's just being himself." I tried to nod, but my face felt stiff. At one point, I caught my father staring at me. He raised his eyebrows, as if asking, "What did you expect?" Then he walked over, patted my shoulder, and said, "Well, you tried." Not everyone's cut out for this. I kept my eyes on the wall behind him, blinking hard. He turned and walked out, not looking back. The gallery felt bigger, emptier. I watched people avoid my eyes, the quiet filling up the space he left behind. I forced myself to smile and thank the guests who stayed, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The music played on, a little too loud now. When most of the guests moved toward the exit or clustered by the bar, I found my father alone at the catering table. He was stacking 3 tiny canapés on a napkin, acting like he hadn't noticed me walking up. I stopped right next to him, waiting until he looked up. He didn't say anything, just raised his eyebrows, like I was the one interrupting. "Why did you have to say that?" I asked. I kept my voice low. I wasn't going to let him turn this into a scene. He grinned, not even pretending to be sorry. "It's a joke, Lena. Don't take yourself so seriously." He picked up one of the canapés and waved it in my direction. "You know this won't last." He said it flat, like it was obvious. I'd heard that tone my whole life, him acting like I was too sensitive, or that I was the problem for reacting. I could feel my stomach tighten, but I kept my face blank. The room felt smaller, even though just minutes ago it was loud and bright. Now it was just his voice, and my own pulse in my ears. My mother stood a few feet away, holding a wine glass she hadn't touched. When I looked at her, she avoided my eyes. She watched the floor, then looked at the catering staff as if she was searching for someone else to talk to. "He doesn't mean it," she whispered. It was so quiet I almost missed it. She didn't defend me. She never did. I tried to keep my tone level. "You embarrassed me." In front of everyone. He rolled his eyes. "Oh, please. If you want people to take you seriously, you have to learn to take a joke. Besides, the art world is tough. I'm just preparing you." He said it like he was doing me a favor. I couldn't think of a single time he'd actually helped me with anything related to my work. He always showed up at these things, but only to remind me he didn't think I belonged. I could smell the wine on his breath, mixed with the food. Behind us, the curator was pretending to reorganize the stacks of plates. She kept glancing over, her mouth pressed tight. She'd heard what he said earlier. She didn't say anything now, but she didn't need to. I saw her bite her lip, like she wanted to step in but wasn't sure if she could. I waited for my father to say something else. He just shrugged again and popped a canapé in his mouth, chewing with his mouth open. I realized I was holding my breath. "Are you proud of me at all? I didn't mean to ask it, but it came out before I could stop myself. He laughed, shaking his head. Don't be so needy, Lena. You're doing fine. But this is just a phase. Don't get carried away. My mother looked at me then, but only for a second. She reached out as if to touch my arm, then changed her mind and fixed her bracelet instead. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to say anything else. I walked away, feeling everyone's eyes on my back, even if no one was actually looking. I heard my father start talking to the catering manager, making another joke. At the door, I glanced back. The curator was still watching, but when she caught my eye, she looked away. My mother took a slow sip of her wine, her shoulders hunched. I went outside for air. The street was empty, except for a couple waiting for their car. I leaned against the wall, pressing my hands into the cold brick. My phone buzzed in my bag. I didn't check it. I stood there for a few minutes, letting the quiet settle. Inside, I could hear laughter starting up again, muffled through the glass. I didn't want to go back in, but I did. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me leave. When I walked in, my father was already telling another story, his hands waving, the crowd laughing along. My mother was back at his side, smiling at nothing. The curator was gone. A week passed. I kept to my usual routine: work, groceries, dinner alone. I didn't answer my father's texts. The phone calls stopped after 3 days. I thought he'd finally dropped it. On Thursday, around 2 in the afternoon, I got an email at my studio address. The subject line was all caps: urgent, provenance inquiry. It came from the museum registrar. I hesitated before opening it. The body was short. MS. Kozak, please clarify the attached document at your earliest convenience. There was a PDF attached. I clicked it open. It was a scan of a consignment agreement, one of the museum's forms. My name appeared in print, then a signature that looked almost like mine. The painting listed was familiar distance, the landscape I'd shown at the reception. The seller's name in the upper right corner, Daniel Kozak. My father. I checked the signature again. It was shaky, rushed. Not my hand, but close enough that it might pass. I read the document line by line. The selling price was blank. The section about artist's representation was filled in with a single sentence: consigned by owner. At the bottom it said, last modified by D. Kozak at email.com. I scrolled back up. My stomach felt cold, not sick, just empty. He'd taken my painting. He'd forged my signature. D, tried to sell it through the museum, as if it was his to give away. I called the registrar's office. The phone rang twice before someone picked up. This is Rachel Kozak, I said. I just got your email about the consignment document. Yes, MS. Kozak. Thank you for getting back to us. We had a man come in, Daniel Kozak. He said he was acting on your behalf. But the paperwork looked off, and your signature didn't match the others we have on file. Did he leave the painting with you? No, he said he'd bring it tomorrow if the paperwork checked out. I see. Is this something you authorized? No, I said. He's my father. I didn't sign that document. That painting is mine. There was a pause. All right. Thank you for clarifying. We'll hold off on any further action. Do you want us to keep a record of this? Yes, please. I'd like a copy of everything. I'll be in touch if I need anything further. Of course. Let us know if there's anything else. I hung up. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at the PDF again. The lines of my fake signature blurred at the edges. I took out my phone and scrolled through old texts from my father. Nothing about the painting. Nothing about the museum. Just the last message from him, 3 days ago. Let me know when you're ready to talk. I closed my eyes for a moment. I didn't feel angry, not yet. I felt nothing. I got up and went to the spare room, where I kept my finished work. Familiar distance was gone. I hadn't noticed before. I checked the stacks twice, then the closet. Just empty space where it should have been. I went back to the kitchen and sat down again. I opened a blank document on my laptop. I started listing everything I could remember from the night of the show, who had keys to my apartment, when I'd last seen the painting, what my father had said. Small details kept surfacing. The way he'd hovered by my bag at the reception, the spare key that had gone missing 2 weeks ago. I wrote it all down, line by line. I saved the file. My hands felt steady. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I waited in the quiet apartment, listening to the sound of the fridge, the hum of cars outside. The sky darkened. I kept thinking about the forged signature, how close it was to my own. The painting was gone. My father had taken it, and for a moment, I almost believed nothing would happen next. I sat there, waiting for something to shift. The front steps creaked the same way they always had. I let myself in, not bothering to text or call ahead. My mother was already asleep, judging by the quiet and the faint blue light coming from under her door. The house smelled like old wood, lemon polish, and something new, maybe her latest candle from the gift shop downtown. My shoes barely made a sound on the hall rug. I walked straight past the living room, ignoring the old family photos, and climbed the stairs. My bedroom door was open. The bed was still made up in the faded quilt she'd sewn when I was in middle school. The bookshelf hadn't changed. My childhood art supplies were stacked in a plastic bin next to the desk. I sat for a minute, not touching anything. My father's voice carried up from the kitchen. He was still awake, talking to someone on the phone, using that low, official tone he saved for business. The office door was at the end of the hall. I tested the handle. Locked. I could hear the whir of his desktop computer behind the door, and the faint clink of glass on the desk. I leaned my forehead against the frame, listening. His voice trailed off after a few minutes. Then his footsteps passed down the stairs and out the back, onto the porch. The screen door shut with a soft bang. I knew his routine. He would walk the block and check the garden, sometimes sit on the bench outside the bakery. I went to the linen closet, pulled out the old tin with sewing needles and mismatched buttons. I found the thin metal hairpin I used to use for art projects and walked back to the office. It took about a minute to pop the lock. The door swung open, silent on its hinges. Inside, it was the same as always. Dry erase boards crowded with scribbled reminders. Family tax files. Certificates on the wall. The desk was cluttered with receipts and a mug half full of cold coffee. I opened the bottom drawer. Files, nothing unusual. The middle drawer stuck for a second, then gave way. Right at the front was a blue folder with a white label, Lena Art. I pulled it out and set it on the desk. The folder was thick, bulging at the seams. I flipped it open. The first page was a gallery invoice with my name and a sale price I didn't recognize, higher than I'd ever been told. The next several pages were exhibition pamphlets, all with my paintings on the cover, some from shows I hadn't even known about. There were printouts of emails between my father and at least 3 different galleries. He'd signed them all in his own name, not mine. Near the back of the folder was a handwritten list, my father's blocky writing. Every painting I'd ever sold was listed, with columns for gallery price, paid to Lena, and held. Some of the numbers matched up. Others didn't. There were gaps, and prices that had been crossed out and rewritten. At the bottom, a new line. Museum possible big payout. I took out my phone and started taking photos of every page. My hands shook, but I kept going. I zoomed in on the invoices, the email printouts, the notes. I made sure to get the front of the folder, the list in his handwriting, everything. I didn't hear anything from downstairs. No footsteps, no creak of the porch. I finished with the last page and put everything back in the exact order I'd found it. The air in the office felt stale. I closed the drawer, checked the door, then relocked it. I slipped back down the hall to my bedroom, shut the door, and sat on the bed with my phone. I scrolled through the photos, trying to make sense of the numbers and the crossed-out lines. I stared at the words museum, possible big payout until the letters blurred. I made myself breathe slowly, counting each inhale. I listened for my father coming back inside, but all I could hear was the tick of the hallway clock. I put my phone face down on the quilt and waited. The kitchen was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I stood by the sink, holding my phone out, screen glowing with the photo of the forged document. My mother was rinsing lettuce under the tap, sleeves pushed up, her wedding ring catching the light. She didn't look up when I walked in, but her shoulders tensed. I held up the phone between us. "Did you know about this?" She stopped moving. Water kept running over her hands. When she finally turned, she looked at the screen and then at me. Her mouth opened and closed. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and stared at the floor. "He said it was just paperwork, Lena. For taxes." I watched her. The word taxes sounded weak. She was still clutching the towel, twisting it in her hands. "Did you read it?" I kept my voice flat. She shook her head, quick, almost desperate. "He told me to sign it, just as a witness. He said he'd take care of everything, that it was just a formality." "For the mortgage," he said. I scrolled to the second photo. Her signature neat, right next to his. My own name, forged in his familiar handwriting. I turned the phone again, so she had to look at it. "You signed as a witness," I said. She closed her eyes. "I'm sorry, Lena. I didn't know. He told me Dee agreed that it was nothing. He needed some money for the mortgage. He said you'd never even notice." I stood there for a second, feeling how small the kitchen seemed. I could hear voices from the TV in the living room, muffled. My mother's hands were trembling. She tried to put the lettuce in a bowl, but dropped a few leaves on the counter. "Did you ask him about it, or did you just sign?" She flinched at that. "I trusted him. He's your father. He said you were helping us, that you understood. He told me not to bother you with it." She traced a little circle on the counter with her finger, like she was scrubbing out a stain. I watched her for a long moment. I could see her age in the lines around her eyes, the gray at her temple. She wouldn't meet my gaze. "You know it's not just taxes," I said. She nodded, but she looked away. I think she knew exactly what it was, or at least had guessed. She just didn't want to put it into words. "He said it was just a little help," she whispered. "He was stressed about the house, about the loan. He said it was temporary." I let the silence stretch. She didn't look up. "You should have called me," I said. Her voice shook. "I didn't want to worry you. I thought he was telling the truth. I never thought he'd—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. I studied the dish towel in her hands, now twisted tight. I realized she wasn't just guilty. She was scared of me, of what I might do, maybe of him too. She de-signed her name without reading, and she knew it. And somewhere in her voice, I heard something else. Resignation. "You know this isn't right," I said, quieter. She nodded again. "I'm sorry, Lena. I'm so sorry." I put the phone down on the counter. I wanted to scream, but I kept my mouth shut. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I just took a step back. "He lied to both of us," I said. Her hands dropped to her sides, dish towel forgotten. I saw tears in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She went back to the sink, started rinsing the lettuce again, like if she just kept moving she could scrub the whole thing away. I left the kitchen. I heard her start to cry, quietly, behind me. I didn't go back. I spent the next week moving slower, but thinking faster. I started with the museum. I called their accounting office, explained I was the artist behind the piece in their lobby. I kept my voice steady, flat. The woman on the phone asked for my name, then asked if I was related to Frank Marston. I said yes. She hesitated, then said she'd email me the transaction log if I could prove my identity. I sent her a copy of my driver's license, attached to an old contract with my signature on it. I waited 2 days. On Thursday, the email came. 2 PDFs. I stared at the numbers for a while. My hands were cold. I opened my dad's old tax returns from last year. He'd left them on my computer so I could help him with TurboTax. The checking account on the refund matched. $14.67. I saved the PDF to a folder marked Evidence. The second document was a copy of the commission agreement. His signature was bold, black, almost angry. My name was there, too. I pulled up old scans of my real signature, put them side by side. The R in Marston was wrong. The loop and the J for Julia was too neat. I screenshotted everything, put it all in the folder. I labeled each file by date and source. I found the original emails from the museum's curator in my inbox, the ones addressed to me, then the ones that started coming to my dad's email address. The switch happened on November 12. Before that, they'd been talking to me. After that, it was all him. I printed out the full thread, highlighted the dates, marked the sudden change in tone. Where I'd been polite, he was blunt. Where I'd hesitated, he promised. Friday, I called the artist's legal aid group I'd found through a friend from college. I left a message, then followed up with an email. I explained what had happened. My father had signed a contract in my name, taken the payment, and kept it. I attached the evidence. I didn't try to sound angry. Just facts. I got a reply Saturday morning from a woman named Dana. She said she'd seen cases like this before, that it was both copyright infringement and fraud. She told me to keep gathering documents and to avoid confronting him in person for now. I started going through the house for anything else. Receipts, sketches, the email printouts. I found my original concept, drawings in a drawer in his office. They were unmarked, but the graphite smudges on the edges were mine. He'd even kept the post-it note I'd stuck on the back. For installation, lobby only. I took photos of everything. That night, I made a spreadsheet. I listed every piece of evidence, what it was, where I'd found it, who could verify it. I put it all on a flash drive and hid it inside the lining of my winter coat. I didn't want him to find it on my laptop. I stopped talking to him. I answered his questions with yes or no. He didn't seem to notice. He spent most of his time in the garage, tinkering with old radios, humming under his breath. At dinner, he told my mother he was expecting a windfall soon. She looked at me but didn't ask. No one said anything about art. I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow. The house felt small, even with 3 bedrooms. I kept thinking about the money, how easily it had disappeared, how simply the lie had slipped into all our lives. By Sunday night, I had a folder on my desktop called Case. It was full. I made a backup on a cloud drive, then another on the flash drive. I wrote out a timeline of every step, every email, every conversation I could remember. I sent a copy to Dana. I didn't feel angry. Not in the way I expected. It was more like a steady pressure, pushing me forward. I knew what I had to do. The plan was simple. I would not confront him. I would not shout. I would let the process work. I just needed proof and time. My phone rang while I was sorting laundry. It was my father. I hadn't heard from him in a few weeks, not since the last strained dinner. I stared at his name for a moment. Then I answered. "Hey, kiddo," he said. His voice was lighter than I remembered. "Can you come over this afternoon? I've got something for you to sign." I hesitated, then said I could be there in an hour. He sounded almost cheerful. It threw me off. I spent the drive over replaying his words, trying to guess what he wanted. My father wasn't the type for random warmth. He met me at the door, smiling. He looked tired, but he was trying to act upbeat. He even hugged me, which was rare. I followed him to the kitchen. He had papers spread out on the table. He gestured to a chair for me. "I made some coffee," he said, already pouring a cup for me like we were close. He slid a document across the table. It was a printout, thick paper, official-looking header. Certificate of Authenticity, it read. Below that, my name as artist, the title of a painting I'd finished a year ago, and a blank line for my signature. "Just need your autograph," he said, tapping the line with a pen. "Makes things smoother if you want to sell it. Buyers like paperwork." I scanned the certificate. It looked almost identical to the one I'd signed for Aunt Marcia's birthday gift last spring. But that was for her, a real painting, a real reason. This one wasn't addressed to anyone. "Who's buying this one?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. He waved his hand. "Oh, just a friend, someone from the club. He loves your stuff. Wanted to make sure it's the real deal." I leaned back. Something felt off. The painting listed was still in my apartment. I hadn't sold it, hadn't even shown it to anyone outside the family. "Are you sure?" I pressed. "Because I have that painting. It's not for sale." He paused, then shrugged. "Well, maybe he wants to reserve it." "Doesn't matter. Just sign. It helps me keep track of things. You know how people are." My father had never cared about paperwork before. He hated clutter, always tossed receipts and old bills. I looked at the stack of certificates on the table. At least 3 others, all with my name, all with different painting titles. None of the paintings had left my studio. "You've been making a lot of these," I said. He gave a little laugh. "Just being organized. In case people ask. It helps you, too." I picked up another certificate. It was for a piece I'd finished 2 years ago, one I'd given to my mother. He watched me, his smile slipping. "Who are these for?" I asked again. His jaw tightened. He avoided my eyes. "Just sign them, kiddo. It's not a big deal." I put the pen down. I looked at him, really looked. I saw the sweat on his hairline, the way he kept glancing at the hallway. My stomach turned. "Are you using these for something else?" He frowned, defensive now. "Why would you say that? I'm helping you. People ask about your work. I connect you." "You're welcome." I shook my head. My mind went to the stories he'd told at family dinners, the friends who'd admired my art. His casual way of talking about family property when he needed cash. I realized he hadn't been selling my paintings. He'd been using the certificates as proof of value, putting them up as collateral, maybe even showing them to banks or friends as assets. I pushed the stack back toward him. "I'm not signing." He glared at me, his warmth gone. "Fine," he said. "It's your loss." I stood up. I left the coffee untouched. As I walked out, I heard him mutter something under his breath, but I didn't catch it. My hands shook on the steering wheel the whole way home. I started to see every past request in a new light. The pattern was there, I just hadn't wanted to see it. I looked at the certificate on the kitchen table. It was printed on heavy paper, my father's neat handwriting already on the signature line. I picked up the pen, glanced once at my mother's careful face, and signed below his name. My hand didn't shake. She watched me, lips pressed together, her eyes flickering with something I didn't want to name. When it was done, she slid the certificate back into a folder, closed it, and tucked it into her bag. "Thank you," she said. "We'll get this to the museum first thing. It's important for your father's reputation." I nodded. "I'll see you out." We walked to the door. She paused on the threshold, searching my face for some sign. I kept my expression flat. She stepped into the hall without another word. I closed the door behind her and locked it. The apartment was quiet after they left. I went to the desk by the window, booted up my laptop, and opened the folder I'd built over the last week. Every email, the invoices, the old photos, scanned and labeled. The voice memo from the phone call with my father, where he'd slipped and named the painting's original owner. The WhatsApp screenshots. I pulled everything into a single PDF, double-checked every page, then saved it to a new folder labeled Demand Letter. I opened a blank document. The words felt clinical, easier than I expected. I addressed it to my father, CCing my mother, the museum director, and my lawyer's generic intake address. The subject line was short. I wrote, "Art theft and fraud, immediate action required." I kept it simple. I stated that I believed the certificate was forged, that the painting's provenance was falsified, and that the sale was based on misrepresentation. I attached the evidence. I said that unless the sale was halted and the truth disclosed to the museum within 48 hours, I would forward the evidence to the local authorities and the press. I read it once, then again. I changed nothing. My throat was dry. I stared at the send button. It was just after midnight. I hit send. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the outbox pinged, and my copy slid into my inbox. I watched the screen, half expecting a reply to come back within seconds. Nothing. I got up, filled a glass of water, and stood by the window, looking down at the empty street. The city was silent, the only movement the flicker of a taxi turning the corner. I sat back down, checking the email again. Still nothing. I opened my phone. 2 unread messages from my mother. "Please call me when you have a moment, and we need to talk about tomorrow." I closed them without responding. The minutes ticked by. I refreshed my email, counting the small blue dots that appeared and disappeared. I checked the PDF again, flipping through the evidence. Everything was there. I thought about calling my lawyer, but it was too late, and I knew she would see the message in the morning. I turned off the main light and sat in the blue glow from my screen. My hands were steady, but my shoulders ached. I waited for the ping that would show someone had replied, or at least open the file. Nothing came. I thought about my father, whether he was awake, if he'd check his email before bed, or if he'd see it first thing in the morning. I pictured my mother reading it, her careful routine broken, her plans upended. I set my phone on the desk. I didn't move for a long time. I listened to the refrigerator hum, the soft creak of the radiator. The city outside kept quiet. My inbox stayed empty. I watched the time crawl past 1:00 a.m., then 2:00. I wondered what they would say when they saw my name in the CC line, the attachment open and undeniable. I wondered who would call first. I didn't go to bed. I sat and waited, letting the silence fill the room. My phone started buzzing before sunrise. At first, I thought it was an alarm or maybe a spam call. But when I looked, it was my father's name filling the screen. I let it ring out. Then another call. Then another. I turned the sound off and watched the screen light up, one after the other, like some kind of warning. I didn't listen to the messages right away. I showered, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. The apartment was quiet. Outside, the street was empty except for a delivery van and a couple walking their dog. It felt like any other weekday morning, but my hands shook a little when I reached for my mug. I finally played the first voicemail. His voice was sharp, almost snarling. "You need to call me back. This is not how we solve things. You're making a mistake." The next one, softer. "Please, just call me. Your mother's upset." "I'm upset. You can't do this, not like this." The third message was louder again. "You don't understand, this is family business. You don't know what you've done. Call me." He left 6 in total. The tone flipped between anger and pleading. By the last one, he'd gone quiet, just a tired sigh and a quick, almost mumbled, "Call me back." I put my phone face down and opened my email. There were messages from the museum, one from the curator, another from their finance department. The subject lines were all variations of urgent, payment hold, and request for documentation. I didn't open them right away. Instead, I went for a walk. I bought a coffee from the bakery around the corner, nodded at the woman behind the counter, and sat outside. The sun was out, weak and pale. I watched people leave for work, kids heading to school. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from my mother. "He's furious. He says you're destroying him." I put the phone back in my bag. I didn't feel much of anything. Not anger, not guilt. Just an ache behind my eyes and a tightness in my chest. When I got home, the emails were still there. I read through them. The museum confirmed they'd frozen all pending payments related to the estate. They said, for legal reasons, they needed to clarify ownership and the chain of custody for the pieces. They'd notified their legal team and would be in touch with next steps. There was a short, formal note at the end of one message. "We appreciate your bringing this to our attention. Please let us know if you have further documentation." I answered with a scanned copy of the will and a brief explanation. No emotion, just dates and facts. I kept the email short. I attached the file and hit send. The rest of the day felt long. My phone kept buzzing, calls from numbers I didn't recognize, maybe lawyers or family friends. I didn't answer any of them. My mother sent a few more texts, all short. "He won't talk to me. He says you betrayed him. Why are you doing this?" I didn't reply to those either. Around 5, I got another call from the museum. The woman on the line sounded nervous. "We just want to let you know, we're pausing everything until we can sort out the paperwork. There may be some questions for you in the next few days." I said that was fine. She thanked me and hung up. I closed my laptop and sat in the quiet. I didn't eat dinner. I turned it off and put it in a drawer. That night, the apartment felt colder than usual. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling. My father's words kept replaying in my head. "Family business. You don't understand. You're destroying him." I didn't feel like I was destroying anything. It felt more like something that had already been broken for a long time. The call from my father came at 8:12 a.m., just as I was pouring coffee in the kitchen. I didn't answer. He tried again, then sent a text. "Call me. Urgent." I set the phone face down and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. An hour later, my mother's voice came from the foyer. She didn't take off her shoes. Her coat was half buttoned, and her hair was still damp from the shower. She stood in the doorway, holding her bag like she wasn't sure if she was staying or leaving. "You need to fix this," she said. I waited. She stepped into the kitchen, lowered her voice. "The firm called an emergency meeting. Your father is on leave. People are talking," she said. "Your uncle won't return our calls. The Johnsons canceled dinner. She looked at me like I was holding a grenade with the pin out. I kept my hands on the counter. She tried again. This will ruin him, she said. You can't let it go this far. I said it was already ruined. She shook her head like I was speaking a different language. She wanted names. Who sent the package? Was it me? Did I talk to anyone? I told her I hadn't sent anything to the firm myself. That was true. I'd only gathered the files and left them in the right mailbox. That was all. She asked what I wanted. She sounded tired, not angry. She wanted me to draft a letter, say it was a misunderstanding, that I'd made a mistake with the bank statements. She said the firm would let it go if I withdrew the complaint. We could fix it as a family. No one else needed to know. I told her I was done lying for him. She put her bag down and sat at the table, hands folded, eyes closed. She asked if I understood what would happen to them if the firm pressed charges. She talked about the mortgage, my father's pension, her reputation at the school. She said she'd never survive the humiliation. There's still time, she said. We can make this go away. I looked at the window. The street was empty. The neighbor's dog barked once, then stopped. I told her I wouldn't change my story. I said it quietly. She didn't answer at first. After a while, she stood up, picked up her bag. She said she hoped I'd be able to sleep at night. She left without looking back. I heard later that afternoon, through one of my father's old friends, that the managing partner had called him into the office conference room. They showed him the envelope with his name on it, the copies of the receipts, the letters. I imagined him reading the printouts, trying to explain away the signatures, the withdrawals, the lines he'd crossed out with his pen. They told him to clear out his desk and not to come back until the investigation was over. Within hours, the news circled through the firm, then spread to the local business council, and finally reached the people who'd always sat at our kitchen table for holidays. No one called that night. The house was silent, except for the washing machine and my mother's footsteps upstairs. I sat in the living room and listened. I heard my parents' bedroom door open, then close. I thought about how many years I'd spent protecting the quiet in this house. I remembered how my father used to say, "Never air your family's laundry in public." I thought about laundry, about dirt that never comes out. I thought about what comes next when you stop pretending. The press release went out on a Wednesday morning. I found out before I even got to work. My phone vibrated with a news alert, then 2 emails from people at the museum who hadn't spoken to me in weeks. I clicked the link, still in bed, and saw my painting on the museum's home page. Underneath, in black and white, acquired directly from the artist Anna. My name. Not his. I read the short paragraph twice. They decorrected the provenance. There was no mention of my father anywhere. The last line said the museum was committed to upholding ethical standards in acquisitions and attribution. I didn't feel anything at first. I just stared at my name, not moving, until the second email came. I got dressed. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even tell Marcus, who was making coffee in the kitchen, that anything had happened. He asked if I wanted toast. I said yes, then sat at the table with my laptop open, refreshing the museum's site again. No new updates. My painting was still there. My name was still there. It was real. By noon, the news had spread further. A few small art blogs picked up the story. They used the museum's quote, copied the image, and wrote a line about the correction. No one said my father's name. I watched the coverage grow on my phone while pretending to listen during a meeting. My boss's face flickered on Zoom. I nodded and said I agreed. The museum didn't mention what happened to my father, but I heard from someone inside that he'd been called into HR the day before. By afternoon, I got the message from my mother. She wrote, "Dad was let go. He says you could have stopped this." I didn't answer her. That night, a reporter I'd never met emailed me. She attached a forwarded message. It was from my father, sent earlier that day, addressed to her editor, subject line in all caps. "My daughter ruined me." The body of the email was long. He wrote that I was ungrateful, that I'd always been difficult, that everything he'd done was to help me. He said I'd set him up, that I'd manipulated the museum, and that I was vindictive. He said, "She has always needed to win and cannot stand my success." The reporter's only comment below was, "Thought you should see this." I didn't reply. I read his words again, slower this time. I pictured him at his desk, typing the message, probably sweating, probably alone. The tone was familiar. It was the same voice he'd used when I was a child and did something he didn't like. Flat, hissing, always a little louder than necessary. I realized he hadn't mentioned my painting at all. It was only about him. Every sentence circled back to his reputation, his sense of being wronged. There was nothing about art, or family, or what he'd actually done. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark for a while. I could hear Marcus in the next room, talking to someone on the phone. The next morning, my inbox was quiet. I checked the museum's site again. My name was still there. There was a new plaque next to the painting. Someone sent me a photo. It was simple, just my name and the year. My father's plaque was gone. There was no trace of him in the gallery now. I kept looking at the forwarded email. I saw it for what it was. My father's pride had depended on me staying small. He'd never wanted me to succeed unless he could claim it. Seeing my name alone, without his, had broken something in him that I never could have fixed. I felt nothing but tired. I closed the email and deleted it. I went back to the house on a Thursday afternoon. The sun was out, but the driveway was empty. I parked at the curb and left the engine running for a moment, just listening. My hands were steady. I hadn't told anyone I was coming, not even my mother. I unlocked the front door with my old key. It still worked. The house was quiet except for the clock in the hallway. I walked to the guest room, where my paintings were stacked against the wall. There were 6 of them left. 3 were wrapped in plastic, the others leaned bare against the drywall. I looked at each one, checking for scratches or dents. I didn't find any. I picked up the largest first and carried it out to my car. Then 2 more, then the last 3. It took 4 trips. No one stopped me. I closed the trunk and locked the car. Inside, I looked around once more. The family photos on the mantel were the same. My father's slippers under the coat rack. I didn't touch anything else. I left my key on the kitchen counter, next to the pile of unopened mail. I turned off the light and closed the door behind me. At my studio, I changed the locks. The landlord didn't ask questions when I called. She came by with new keys and watched as I handed her the old set. She looked at me, hesitating. I told her I needed privacy. She nodded. I put the keys in my pocket and carried my paintings up the stairs myself. My arms ached by the end. I leaned the canvases against the far wall, in a line. I sat down on the floor, facing them. The room smelled of paint and dust. I didn't turn on the radio. I blocked my father's number that night. I stared at the contact on my phone for a few seconds before hitting the button. It didn't feel like anything. I put the phone down and made tea. My mother called the next day. I answered, letting her talk first. She asked if I was coming for dinner, if I'd seen the news, if I was all right. I told her I was busy. I kept my voice even. She started to cry, quietly. I waited for her to stop. I said I needed to work. She hung up first. The museum sent an envelope by courier. I opened it at the kitchen table. There was a formal letter on heavy paper with a typed apology. They regretted the confusion. They valued my contribution. They hoped to work together again. There was a check made out to me for the full amount of the commission. No conditions, no notes. I stared at it for a while, then put it in a drawer. I didn't call them back. I cleaned the studio that weekend. I swept the floor, washed the windows, wiped down the tables. I sorted my brushes into jars, lined up my paints by color. I didn't listen to music. The building was nearly empty. I took down the old calendar from the wall and threw it out. I opened the window and let the air in. I sat at the work table and started a new sketch, just lines at first. My hand didn't shake. At night, I lay in bed without checking my phone. I didn't wait for it to vibrate. I fell asleep early, with the window cracked open. I woke up once around 3 and stared at the ceiling. I listened to the quiet. There was no anger in my chest, just a kind of empty space. I closed my eyes and slept until morning. When I woke up, the sun was already up. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the street. I didn't think of my father. I didn't think of the museum. I looked at the light on the sidewalk and started planning the next painting. My father hasn't called me since the news came out. The last message in the family group chat is from months ago, a forwarded meme from my uncle. No one replied to it. My mother texts sometimes, just to ask if I'm eating or if I've seen the latest movie. She visited my apartment once, brought a plant, didn't mention my name in the papers or the interview I gave. She looked around the living room, saw my canvases stacked in the corner. She said, quietly, "It's nice here." We ate takeout and watched TV. I didn't ask about him, and she didn't off. The museum now has my painting on permanent display. The plaque lists my name, dates, and the story of its disputed authorship. I walk by sometimes when it's quiet and watch school groups file past. A few people stop to read the little card. I stand far enough away that no one recognizes me. The gallery that represents me now is national, not local. I sign every contract myself. The lawyer they recommended reads every line twice. I pay her invoice the same day. My apartment is small, but it's mine. Rent comes from direct deposit, not a parental transfer. There's a coffee shop downstairs that knows my order. In the mornings, I walk to the studio, work until the light fades, go home. I have a routine. No one in my family asks to see my new work. The group chat pings sometimes, but only when someone shares a family photo from years ago. I don't reply. I save the photos anyway. The silence is steady. I know what I own now. 6 months have passed since the opening at the museum. The house is quieter. I work most mornings with the windows open, letting in the city noise. My father hasn't called since the article came out about the investigation. Sometimes his name appears on my phone, but I let it go to voicemail. He doesn't leave messages anymore. The painting that started everything hangs in a side gallery now. I visit sometimes, watching strangers stop and tilt their heads. I don't linger. I never introduce myself. When I walk home, I take the long way, past the bakery where my mother used to buy bread on Saturdays. She sent me a text after the news broke. "I hope you're safe." We haven't spoken since. Yesterday, a plain envelope came in the mail. No return address, childish handwriting, a school somewhere in the suburbs. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper. She wrote that she saw my painting on a school field trip. Her father told her art was a waste of time, but she wanted to paint anyway. She said the colors made her feel like she belonged somewhere. She asked if it was hard to keep going when people wanted you to stop. I read her letter twice. I pinned it above my desk, just over the discoloration left by the frame where my father's signature used to be on the old consignment form. The corner sticks out a little. I keep glancing up at it while I work, tracing the uneven lines where she wrote her name. The studio smells like turpentine, and does most days. Sometimes I think about my father, what he'd say if he saw the letter. Sometimes I don't think about him at all. The work keeps going, slow and steady. The letter stays where it is. That's the story of how I handled my family, using me for their own gain. It still doesn't feel real sometimes, looking back at how casual the betrayals were and how quiet the fallout ended up being. Do you think I went too far or not far enough? If your own parents and sister tried to profit off your work behind your back, would you have let it slide, or would you have blown it up the way I did? I still wonder if there could have been a way to keep some peace, or if it was always going to end in silence and distance. I know some people would have just walked away, but part of me needed them to know I saw what they did. Let me know if you think I should have forgiven them, or if you'd want that kind of truth out in the open too. I'm not sure if I regret it, but I'm not sure I don't either. If you've been through anything similar, or you think someone in your life needs to hear this, share this story or leave a comment. I read every one. What would you have done if you were in my place?